On today's show, Jordi Fernandez benches Ben Saraf and Egor Demin in search of Brooklyn's first win, and yet the Nets are still blown out. I'll tell you why the Nets coach is going to have to reevaluate his priorities sooner rather than later, right now.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in to the Locked On Nets podcast right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team, the Brooklyn Nets, every single day. I'm Erik Slater, Brooklyn Nets beat reporter for ClutchPoints.com. Thank you for making me your first listen of the day. This show is 100% free on all those great platforms. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. And on today's episode, I'm going to be recapping the Nets' 129-105 loss to the Philadelphia 76ers on Sunday at Barclays Center, during which Jordi Fernandez made a significant change to Brooklyn's starting lineup and rotation. And Jordi benched the rookies pretty much. He took Ben Saraf out of the starting lineup and out of the rotation altogether in favor of Tyrese Martin, who started at point guard. He barely played Egor Demin in this game, and these were lineup changes that were surprising, but somewhat predictable. I envisioned after the last game against the Hawks that a lineup change was going to come because the Nets were at 0-5. They haven't competed in many games this year, and Jordi was clearly taking steps that you could see in the last game to try to change things up and to try to prevent this locker room from spiraling and the season from ultimately getting out of control, which is crazy to say because we're only 6 games into the season. And that's fine. It's fine for Jordi to try to take those steps, and I was pretty confident that we were going to see some kind of change after Wednesday's loss to the Hawks because you got quotes from Michael Porter Jr., the Nets' top player in the locker room, asking him about their struggles, about the 0-5 start, about what could change. He pointed to the point guard struggles, and he said, it's really hard to win when you have rookie point guards playing and when you don't have that spot solidified. And he also said, I think we're going to need to see a change in terms of the groups that are playing together. And then Jordi comes out. He had his quotes about nothing is given. You have to earn your spot. He benched Ben Saraf and Egor Demin during the fourth quarter against the Hawks, and the Nets played pretty well in that fourth quarter. They held the Hawks at 23 points. They got back in the game, and he said that none of the draft picks playing time is solidified, anything like that. You have to earn your spot. And all of that's fine. That's great to say all that stuff. But in this game, Egor Demin plays 15 minutes in this game against the 76ers, 4 of which came in garbage time. And to me, that's just effing ridiculous. I think that is just absurd. For your number 8 pick, your first lottery pick in 15 years on a team that isn't competing and really doesn't have a lot of guys playing hard outside of this, which I'm going to get to in a little bit, to only play that guy pretty much 11 meaningful minutes during this game, to me, that is absolutely ridiculous. And the Ben Saraf conversation, you can have a debate there about whether or not Saraf should be playing. I think some people think he should. Some people think that he shouldn't. I think that Ben Saraf should be getting at least some minutes in this rotation. You have 5 rookie first-round picks on this team, and barely any of them are playing. I mean, Jordi tried to play Drake Powell, presumably because the Nets' defense has been so horrendously bad and embarrassing, and I said that on my last pod that I thought that Drake's minutes might come sooner rather than later because something needs to change defensively, and unfortunately, Drake was playing well in his first 4 minutes. He had a transition layup. He had a couple nice defensive plays, and then he turned his ankle, the same ankle that he turned during the season opener against Charlotte, and it was like a non-contact thing. Nobody was even around him, and he just rolled it, so he was ruled out for the game, and unfortunately, he didn't get to play, and he probably would have been getting more playing time, but even then, Egor Demin playing 15 minutes and Ben Saraf not playing at all, to me, that is absurd in a season that's about development, and when there's other guys up and down this roster outside of the rookies who are not playing hard and who are not playing good basketball, to not lean into giving these guys minutes, I just think that's absurd. And it would be one thing, if you had a veteran point guard on this team or a high-level ball handler who wasn't getting minutes or playing time at the expense of these rookies being in the game, but that's not the case. I mean, Tyrese Martin, that's the player that is starting at point guard over your first lottery pick in 15 years, a player who clearly needs a lot of reps. Nothing against Tyrese. Tyrese had a great summer. He had a great preseason. He's busted his butt to become a part of this Nets team, solidify a standard roster spot, make the team, get a rotation spot. But tonight, you start him over Ben Saraf and Egor Demin, and he goes out and he puts up a bagel 0 points, 4 assists, 2 turnovers, 0 of 6 shooting in 27 minutes. And just, to me, playing him over Egor Demin or Ben Saraf, like 27 minutes compared to 15 for Egor and none for Ben. I get that you're trying to compete and you're trying to kind of like keep this from spiraling away and keep the guys invested. But I'll tell you this, like Tyrese is a nice player on a good team. He's probably like a 10th to a 15th man in a rotation, if that. He's not going to be the difference from you competing in a lot of these games over a guy like Egor Demin or even Ben Saraf. Tyrese isn't even a point guard. Like he has some ancillary ball handling and, pick and roll playmaking and ball handling ability, but he's not a point guard. And that really showed in this game with him trying to do that for extended stretches. And you look at this, like, Michael Porter Jr. comes out and he makes this quote after the Hawks loss about the point guard play. And it's really hard to, excel offensively and, play well as a team when you don't have that position solidified. And something needs to change. And Jordi makes these changes to the rotation, presumably to try to get the Nets on track at that point guard position and, create a semblance of flow within the offense. And I look at those MPJ quotes, I look at this lineup change, and I just say, like, are the Nets a great offensive team? No, by any stretch of the imagination before this game against the 76ers. But defense is the real problem, not the offense. Like, you look at the offense before this game against the 76ers, it was actually playing much better than expected. Before this game, they were 115 offensive rating. That was 14th in the NBA. They were in the top half of the league. 54 effective field goal percentage as a team. That ranks 16th. They were not turning the ball over at an alarming rate. They were averaging 15.8 turnovers per game. That was 15th. The problem, which everybody can see, is the defense. The Nets before this game had a 129 defensive rating. That was dead last in the league. They allowed 522 points, 130.5 per game through 4 games, the most in franchise history. Their defensive rating before this game was 8 points below the next worst team in 29th, which was the Toronto Raptors. And then they come out in this game and they allow 73 points in the first half of this game. Kelly Oubre in the first quarter had 22 points on 9 of 12 shooting in the first quarter. They're making Kelly Oubre look like Kobe Bryant out there. And they make this lineup change, and the problems remain the problems. Defensively, it was still a joke. And then you look offensively, they turned the ball over 18 times tonight. That was one off the most that they've had in any game this season. This was one of the worst offensive and defensive performances of the season thus far. And, I think that at some point, Jordi, we're early. It's 6 games in. Like, I understand Jordi trying to, keep this locker room together and try to keep it from spiraling and try to do things that compete. And, all those things that he says about nothing's given, you have to earn your minutes, like really trying to, put those words into action and show the veterans that. But Tyrese Martin, like, coming in this game, playing that many more minutes. A guy like Jalen Wilson, who was on the roster bubble and had a pretty good case of a guy who could be cut, playing him more minutes than Egor Demin, while Ben Saraf gets no minutes. Danny Wolf and Nolan Troy get no minutes. Like, I just think that that's ridiculous. At the end of the day, this season is about development. It's about draft position. You need to try to compete. But if the guys that you're trying to compete with are Tyrese Martin and Jalen Wilson and some of these other guys over a guy like Egor Demin, your first lottery pick in 15 years, like, that's not how to go about this. I'm watching the end of the 76ers game, and it's a blowout. Like, they're down by 20-plus points with 5 minutes left, 6 minutes left, and I'm watching Cam Thomas and Michael Porter Jr. in the game chucking threes and trying to get their point totals up at the end of this game, while guys like Egor Demin and Nolan Troy, Danny Wolf, Ben Saraf are on the bench. And I guess Jordi was trying to make a statement, keeping these veterans in and making them play to the end. I guess that's like some kind of a punishment. Really, I don't think it was a punishment, because Cam Thomas got to stay in there and chuck up his shots to get his meaningless point total up. But those guys being in the game down the stretch in a blowout over some of these rookie guys, that is just ridiculous to me. And I respect what Jordi is trying to do, but the practice and like the practicality of how he's trying to go about that, I don't think that it was a sound vision at all. And if you would have told me that Jordi was going to make these changes and play Tyrese Martin 27 minutes at point guard and play Jalen Wilson this many more minutes than Egor and not play Ben at all, I wouldn't have said like, oh yeah, they're going to compete much better against this Philadelphia 76ers team. A 76ers team that was without Joel Embiid, is without Jared McCain, is without Paul George, and you're still getting the doors blown off of you, and you continue to play atrociously defensively, and you have probably your worst offensive game of the season, or one of them, with Ben Saraf on the bench, with Egor Demin only playing 11 meaningful minutes. I mean, I just don't think that the process was sound here. And I think anybody that has watched these games through the first 5 games of the season could easily say, or should be able to say, that the defense and the effort and the engagement was the main problem with this team. And that far transcended the rookies and Ben Saraf and Egor Demin, who sure, like, have had their warts, have had their struggles, but I would say are playing hard for the most part and have been a part of an offense that has been league average, like 14th in the NBA up to this point. The problems far transcend those two people. What are those problems? What did Jordi Fernandez have to say about these changes and those issues? And how is he going to address them moving forward? I'll get into all that when I continue Locked On Nets after a quick break. But before that, I want to tell you about our friends over at Robinhood. Your ambition just met its match with Robinhood. You play for the win, not just on game day, every day. Locking in on every opening, beating your PR, beating it again. Channel that drive into your money. Robinhood puts you in control of your money. Trade stocks and ETFs, options, futures, and crypto all on one platform. You can now build and execute your own trades from a desktop with Robinhood's Legend Advanced tools, or take advantage of the new Robinhood Strategies with a tailored portfolio managed by a team of experts. You expect more from yourself. Expect more from your money too. Get started today at Robinhood.com/yourmoney. Again, that's Robinhood.com/yourmoney. Your money, your move. Basketball season is officially here, and nothing beats being in the arena for those opening games. But let's be real. Getting tickets can be a total headache. Between waiting in queues, surprise fees, and prices that jump right before checkout, it's easy to get frustrated when all you want to do is cheer on your team. That's where Game Time comes in, the app that gives fans the advantage. It's your ultimate life hack for scoring amazing NBA tickets fast, easy, and stress-free. Guys, I recently used Game Time to grab seats for an NBA game, and it couldn't have been simpler. I had great seats and minutes. I love that what you see is what you pay. No hidden fees at checkout. Plus, I could see exactly what my seat view looked like before I bought the tickets with their in-app seat view feature. And their zone deals are a game changer. You pick the section, Game Time picks your seats, and you save big. So take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. That's code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Coming back from the break, continuing today's Locked On Nets episode, talking about Brooklyn's 129-105 loss to the 76ers on Sunday, and Jordi Fernandez's decision to bench Ben Saraf and barely play Egor Demin in favor of Tyrese Martin and some other veterans. And the Nets still got their doors blown off in this game by a Philadelphia 76ers team that was shorthanded. And after the fact, Jordi Fernandez continued to look very despondent. He continued to look like he was searching for any kind of answers. And Jordi gave some pretty eye-opening quotes after this game. He was asked about the Nets' lack of effort. He was asked about what needs to change. And the first thing that he said, I'm going to give you guys these full quotes because these are some of the more eye-opening quotes that you're going to see from a head coach 6 games into a season. First one, Jordi said, "I'm failing at trying to get my guys to play hard, and I'm trying to ask them questions. Ask, how do I get them to play really hard? And then you live with the result if they do. But I'm not living with this result because the effort is not there and the defense is not there, and we're turning the ball over. We're not allowing ourselves to compete and to be coached because this focus and effort is not there. This is a really good challenge for me as a head coach, as our group, and I'm going to try to keep getting it done with them." So that was the first quote. And then Jordi was asked more about what needs to change. What are the specific issues that are not allowing this team to compete? And he said, "It's everything from the lack of attention to the body language. That all goes with energy. And like I said, it starts with me. I'm asking them to play really hard and to play with purpose, and we're not doing it. So I'm doing something wrong besides the coverages. This group is different than all the groups that I've worked with, and we want to create winning habits. And right now, we don't have them. We're very far from that. We're actually on the other side." So those are some pretty damning quotes from a head coach in Jordi Fernandez. 6 games into a season. Like, that's the thing. Like, we've seen plenty of teams tank every year. And, does it get ugly throughout the course of the season? Sure. But a lot of teams, like, 6 games into a season, for it to look this ugly, Like, that is usually not the case. A lot of times teams that are tanking start out, can start out hot or can start out a little bit better than expected. The Nets did that last season. And this team just looks like they have no purpose. They have no energy. And it's just a stark contrast to what we saw last season. And the reason for that, I feel like, is the Nets don't have a leader. Like, we talked about it last year when Jordi Fernandez, when Sean Marks held on to these guys like Dennis Schroeder, Cam Johnson, Dorian Finney-Smith, and, especially Cam Johnson, who they held on to through the season. You heard the things about veteran leadership is important in the locker room. Like, that stuff has meaning. And does it? Like, I think it definitely does. I think draft position and maximizing your lottery odds is probably more important, but this is the ugly side of tanking. This is how ugly it can get if you ship these veterans off, if you just prioritize fully the draft position, which Sean Marks has done this season. And if you were a Nets fan that was asking them to tank harder last season, if you thought that they didn't do enough to maximize their tank last season, and I was in that camp, but if you're one of those fans, tip your cap to Sean Marks right now, because Sean Marks, from a tanking perspective, has cooked with making this a tanking roster, bringing in only rookie point guards and the two top players on the team, pairing Cam Thomas with Michael Porter Jr. Like, if you're a tank supporter, like, round of applause for Sean Marks for what he's done. But yeah, like, the reason that the Nets aren't competing and the reason that Jordi Fernandez is just being hung out to dry and left up there in these press conferences and just fumbling to find something to say about what to do is because the Nets have no leadership. I said this after the Hornets loss in the season opener. Last year entering the season, their top guys were Dennis Schroeder, Cam Johnson, Dorian Finney-Smith. And, Cam Johnson is a high IQ, well-respected veteran player. Dennis Schroeder and DFS, more so than Cam Johnson, are really like those junkyard dogs, guard 94 feet, tough-minded, gritty dudes. And you go from those three leaders in Schroeder, Cam Johnson, and DFS. And this year, it's Cam Thomas and Michael Porter Jr. are the top two players on this team. You can throw in Terrence Mann if you want, but he's not like the caliber of offensive player, the caliber of guy who's going to have the ball in his hands all game. Those are the guys that are leading teams. And Cam Thomas and Michael Porter Jr., those two do nothing to lead this team. Absolutely nothing. Their body language is terrible. Their defensive effort is terrible. They don't pass the ball. They take bad shots. They are not leaders of the team. Cam Thomas, I'm going to get into him more later in the last segment, but he looks like a guy who's pretty checked out. And I, talked about this with Lucas Kaplan. I've said this, during the offseason since Cam signed the QO, that I think this is heading towards a midseason trade. And I think this situation is looking more and more untenable. And I think this is trending in the same direction as a Dennis Schroeder trade in terms of like when the free agents are able to be traded again on December 15th. I think that we'll see the Nets and Cam Thomas's representation working together to try to find a trade out of here. And I think that's in the best interest of both sides. I'm not saying that with any sourced information or anything I've heard. I'm just reading the tea leaves. And I think that is the direction this is heading. But you talk about the Nets having no leadership. You talk about Cam Thomas and Michael Porter Jr., some of these other guys that are coming up short. And Jordi Fernandez in this game benches Egor, Demin, and Ben Saraf. And the purpose, presumably, behind that bench is saying, like, everything is earned, nothing is given. Like, nobody's spot is guaranteed. You have to earn that. Like, it's merit-based. Like, that's fine. But then you look at this game, and like, there's plenty of guys out there playing who are not playing as hard as Egor, Demin, or Ben Saraf on a nightly basis. Like, sure, Egor and Ben might come up short in some regards. They're 19 years old. They're rookies. They're going to make mistakes on both ends of the floor. But I can say, watching those guys play the whole year, they're playing hard. There's plenty of guys on this team who are not playing as hard as those guys. There are plenty of guys on this team who are coming up short regularly. And Cam Thomas and Michael Porter Jr. are not playing hard, engaged, like two-way basketball. Far from it. And, I know Jordi Fernandez isn't going to bench those guys because they are the team's top two offensive players. And if those guys aren't playing, the Nets probably have no chance of competing offensively because they just don't have the shot creation outside of that. But I said this since those Michael Porter Jr. quotes. I said this since Jordi Fernandez benched Demin and Saraf during the fourth quarter of that Hawks game. I think that while The Nets point guard play has been subpar. Their issues through 5 games and now 6 have far transcended the point guard position. They've stemmed from the defensive end of the floor mainly. They've stemmed from a lack of engagement, a lack of focus, a lack of hustle. And that stuff starts from the top down with Cam Thomas, Michael Porter Jr., whoever else you want to say. That's where it goes from there down. And if Jordi Fernandez is going to address anything to try to get these guys to win, he needs to address the effort of those guys, his top 2 guys, and maybe benching Saraf and benching Demin was kind of a roundabout way to trying to get those guys to believe and buy in and play harder. We got those quotes from Michael Porter Jr. And right after that, Jordi Fernandez pretty much responded and did exactly what it seemed like Michael Porter Jr. wanted to do. And he benched the rookies, and still the Nets come out. Their effort isn't good. Their defense still looks terrible. And this game was exemplary of the fact that these problems and these issues are not just a product of the rookie point guard play. It goes far past that. And a lot of that, as I've said, has to do with the top players. And Cam Thomas in this game really struggled. Michael Porter Jr. really struggled. Terrence Mann actually was a bright spot and had a good game. So I'm going to talk about those guys, what we see from them, and how the veteran leadership from this team, whether I think they can right the ship moving forward at all. I'll talk about that when I close out Locked On Nets after a quick break. Guys, let's be real. Making excuses doesn't solve anything. We've all heard them before. It's just stress. I'm tired, or it happens to everyone sometimes. But when it comes to performance, sometimes your body just needs a little extra support. And that's where Rugiet comes in. Rugiet.com offers fast-acting, doctor-prescribed treatments for ED designed to help you stop making excuses and start making moves. Rugiet makes it easy to get started. You just connect with a board-certified doctor 100% online, no awkward waiting rooms, no in-person appointments. If prescribed, your treatment ships discreetly straight to your door. The process is fast, simple, and private, and it's all handled by real doctors. It's about confidence, connection, and getting back to the moments that matter. Visit rugiet.com/LockedOnNBA to get 15% off your first order. That's rugiet.com/LockedOnNBA. And don't forget to use our code LockedOnNBA so they know that we sang you. Rugiet, stop making excuses and start making moves. Coming back from the break, closing out today's Locked On Nets episode, talking about Brooklyn's blowout loss to the Philadelphia 76ers, dropping them to 0-6 to start the season. And the Nets' top players played pretty rough in this game. And, they made this change from the rookie point guards, benching them, going with a more veteran-heavy lineup, and it did not show results, mainly because the defense was so bad. But then also on the offensive end, their star guy, or not star guys, but their lead guys, and Michael Porter Jr. and Cam Thomas, did not play well. I'm going to start with MPJ. I think he's the less worrisome of the two between him and Cam Thomas, but he had a rough game tonight. He was 7 of 23 from the field, 1 of 12 from 3. He scored 17 points. He had 2 assists, 3 turnovers, so pretty rough offensively. He actually had 17 rebounds, which was a career high, so good effort on the boards, but I think the defense still was not good. The engagement was not good, and he's just taken some of these really tough shots, which is what he has been doing. Like, I kind of marveled after the last episode, the fact that MPJ has stepped into this expanded role and he's maintained his efficiency. He's been, near 50, 40, 90 on really tough shots. Like, that has been the most impressive part. And I think we saw that again today, and the shots were just not falling. He was 7 of 23 from the field, as I said, 1 of 12 from 3. And I think that the shot selection as the game progressed got a little dicey. And at a certain point, it's going to be tough for MPJ because the offense is, it's a difficult offense to be in with rookie point guards, or with Tyrese Martin at point guard, with, Cam Thomas, a player who has clear limitations as your co-star guy. It's going to be tough, but MPJ, the shot selection, it's going to need to improve, and just the body language, the overall effort. I haven't seen it a ton from MPJ. And I'm, for a player who came in, he's getting a shot to kind of prove his worth. He was just traded from a team that he won a title with. And obviously his contract played a big role in that, but they said we don't think that you can make it work with you at this price point. We don't think you're worth keeping around. And you would think that that would light a fire under him. And thus far, he's scored, he's made his tough shots. The defensive effort from the preseason into this game, into the first 6 games of the year, it hasn't been there. And the body language a lot of the time is just not great. But Michael Porter Jr., it is what it is. I don't really think he's going to be a long-term piece here, but he is the Nets' top player right now. And you go past him and you go to Cam Thomas, and Cam had that 40-point game against the Spurs where it was obviously 40 points, 0 assists. I gave my opinion on that. I said it was amazing scoring. I had a lot of concerns about the process and the playmaking. And I'm not going to like brag and say I'm right or anything. I don't really care about that. But these last couple of games after that, the last 3 games after that, Cam has really struggled. And the offensive process, the body language, the engagement, it has all looked really bad. Like you look at CT in this game, and he finished with 29 points on 9 of 19 shooting with 1 assist and 3 turnovers. But you look at that, like he scored most of those points in garbage time, and there was just like it was a chuck fest down the stretch of him and MPJ when the Nets are down 20, and Jordi Fernandez for some reason still has them in the game over the rookies, just letting them chuck up threes. And Cam, had a hot fourth quarter when the game was already completely over. But you look at him through the first 3 quarters of this game, he had 16 points. He was 5 of 13 from the field, 1 of 2 from 3, and he had 1 assist and 3 turnovers. And the process from Cam on both ends of the floor, like I've said this with Cam, and I continue to say it, and it's why I think that this situation's untenable. I said entering this season, Cam was kind of disrespected, or at least in his own eyes was disrespected. Nobody throughout the league had cap space, but even with that, there were other restricted free agents who got interest from other teams about sign-in trades, from other teams about other things. When you talk about Jonathan Kuminga, Josh Giddey, whoever you want to say, those teams had other interests. They had interest from other teams, and they from their own teams got sizable contracts. Cam Thomas had no interest from other teams, and he only got an offer that was 2 years, $30 million with a team option in the second year. So with that, I said coming into the season, if Cam was going to try to get the kind of offer that he wanted, which is presumably like starter level money, approaching $30 million annually, he was going to have to reevaluate and change his approach to the game. He was going to have to play harder on defense. And even if he still came up short, at least show more effort on that end. And he was going to have to shift from a, completely score first mindset and balance it to a little bit more with a playmaking mindset and see the floor better and do some things to try to get his teammates involved and make them better. And through 6 games, not only has the body language looked bad, and for extended stretches, some would say most of these first 6 games, that Cam just doesn't look like he wants to be out there. The process has been more of the same. And I would say it's even devolved more in the wrong direction compared to what we saw last season. Like you look at CT, he had that game against the Cavaliers where he got hot and he had 33 points and 9 assists. And since then, in those last 4 games, he has 6 assists in his last 4 games. And everybody always says when I bring up assist numbers, or anybody brings up assist numbers, they say, look at the potential assists. Like guys are just missing shots. They're not making shots. Like if you look at the potential assists, Cam is averaging 7 potential assists per game during that span over his last 4 games. That is by far the lowest of any player who's posting above a 30% usage rate like Cam is. Cam is posting near 35% usage, which is just monstrous. And the assists and the potential assists, the playmaking, the court mapping, the seeing the floor, he's just devolving further and further into not making the right reads, into having tunnel vision, into not getting his team involved. I mean, there was one play today that I actually posted on Twitter that you guys can go see. If you go to my Twitter, the video's up there, where he drove down the floor in kind of like a secondary transition play. He drove down to the floor into the paint his right side. 4 guys collapsed on him. He had Egor Demin wide open in the right corner where he was on the strong side. He had Jalen Wilson wide open in the other corner, and he had Zaire Williams pretty much open on the wing. And he stopped. He held the ball in between 4 guys. He kind of pump faked. He tried to shovel it to Nick Claxton, and it was a turnover. And that is just the thing with Cam Thomas is the court mapping, there are glaring limitations. And outside of that, like I've said, I don't always think that the lack of assists or anything is because he's a selfish player. I think that he just has limitations as a court mapper. I think he's a smaller guy at 6'2". So when you get in and around the trees, it's more difficult to see those reads and pass over guys. And I think that's true. But I'd also say that in this game and in the last game that they played where Cam was 6 for 20 against the Hawks, he has tunnel vision. He's trying to get his shots up. He does not look like he's playing team basketball whatsoever. And the defense remains abysmal. The body language remains terrible. And not to just pile on Cam, but he's a guy who's trying to earn a contract. Like he was disrespected this past summer. And we said going into this, I talked about this with tons of people around the NBA, and they all said after that happened that Cam was going to come into this year. The Nets, obviously, and a lot of other teams who could be suitors throughout the league are going to be looking at him, watching his body language, watching how he approaches this, watching if he stays engaged and plays through this and tries to earn his deal. And thus far, Cam has not really checked any of those boxes to me in terms of reevaluating his approach and the play style, and also the body language, looking engaged, trying to be a leader for a young group. He just hasn't checked any boxes, and that's why I think the situation is looking more and more untenable and is probably trending in the direction of a trade. But closing today's episode out with a positive note, I know this has been very negative, and I'm going to make an effort on these pods to try to give something positive in every episode. And I would say in this game, Terrence Mann, I thought was a positive. He had 17 points, 5 rebounds, 4 assists, 3 steals. He was 7 of 9 from the field. And in these last 3 games, I would say that Terrence is the guy whose effort has been consistent. He's played hard. He's trying to do the right things. He might come up short sometimes. He's not shooting at a very high level from 3. The Nets were 4 of 29 from 3 in this game, which is unbelievable. Or at least at one point, they were 4 of 29 before all the garbage time makes from MPJ and Cam Thomas. Terrence Mann is not the best 3-point shooter right now. He gets beat at the point of attack defensively, but he's playing hard. He's trying to do the right things. And if you look at these last 3 games, he's at 16.3 points, 5.3 rebounds, 3.3 assists. He's shooting 20 of 29 from the field during that span. So Terrence Mann, amidst all of, the Nets players who aren't playing hard, all of, the gross lack of effort and engagement we're seeing, I think Terrence Mann has been the veteran and the guy who has tried to lead and tried to be somebody who you could look at as an example of, how to do things the right way. But I said, these things go from the top down. And while Terrence is a starter, the top offensive players on this team, the lead dogs, are Michael Porter Jr. and Cam Thomas. So there's only so much that Terrence Mann can do. But I do think that he has been a bright spot through 3 games. But that's all I have for today's episode of Locked On Nets. If you guys do not already, make sure to subscribe to Locked On Nets on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts, whether Apple Podcasts or Spotify. If you have a second right now and you enjoy the content, smash that like button. Leave a comment, leave a 5-star review. Anything you can do to engage is much appreciated. We got another Nets game on Monday against the Minnesota Timberwolves, and then we got one more, and I think they play the New York Knicks on Sunday. So we got a rivalry game coming up. We'll see if Jordi Fernandez can right the ship. We'll see if the rotations stay the same, if the rookies get more involved. We'll see how all that plays out. But I'll have coverage of all that and more when I'm back tomorrow talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.